My name is Anita E. Segura, 29 years old, and it took me almost 10 months to understand that I wasn't really Ryan Walker's girlfriend. I was the system that kept his life running. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly, one ordinary day after another, until I could no longer pretend I didn't see it. Ryan and I had been together for nearly 2 years when he moved into my condominium. His lease had ended after his roommates unexpectedly broke their contract, and he needed somewhere temporary while he searched for a new place. The condominium belonged to me. My grandmother had left it to me 3 years earlier, and I had spent countless weekends repainting walls, replacing floors, and slowly turning it into a home I loved. When Ryan carried his last moving box through the front door, it felt exciting. We cooked together almost every evening during those first months. Sunday afternoons became our favorite routine, experimenting with new recipes while music played softly through the apartment. If I vacuumed the living room, Ryan cleaned the kitchen. If he folded laundry, I washed dishes. It wasn't perfect, but it felt balanced, and balance felt like love. Somewhere around the 6th month, things began changing so gradually that I almost missed it. Ryan started coming home exhausted from work and saying he didn't have the energy to cook. I understood. I made dinner instead. Then he became too stressed to stop by the grocery store after work, so I picked up groceries during my lunch breaks. Soon, I was handling laundry because he had an early meeting, paying bills because he forgot, cleaning bathrooms because he was busy, and organizing weekends around errands that somehow always benefited him. I kept telling myself relationships naturally shifted during difficult seasons. People helped each other when life became overwhelming. I believed this was simply one of those seasons. I never stopped to ask why his difficult season seemed permanent, while mine never existed. The first moment that should have warned me was almost ridiculous. Every morning I made coffee for both of us. It wasn't something Ryan had ever requested. I simply enjoyed starting our mornings with a small act of kindness. One Wednesday I overslept before an important presentation at work. I barely had enough time to pour myself a quick cup before rushing out the door. That evening Ryan barely spoke to me. Finally I asked, "Did something happen?" He looked genuinely disappointed. "You didn't make coffee this morning." I blinked. "I was running late." "You know I need that routine before work." "There was still coffee in the machine." "You know it isn't the same." His tone wasn't playful. It sounded like I had genuinely failed him. I apologized simply to end the conversation. The following morning, I woke up 20 minutes earlier to make his coffee again. After that, I never forgot. Not because I wanted to, because I didn't want another argument over something so small. Months later, Ryan decided to host dinner for a few of his closest friends. He invited Michael, Daniel, and Owen, while promising everyone an amazing homemade meal. The only problem was that Ryan spent the afternoon watching football with them, while I stayed home preparing everything by myself. I spent 6 straight hours cooking. Roasted vegetables, fresh bread, homemade pasta, dessert. By the time everyone arrived, the apartment smelled incredible. "This food is unbelievable," Michael said after taking his first bite. Ryan smiled proudly. "I found the recipe last week." I looked up from serving another plate. Found the recipe? I had planned the menu, bought every ingredient, prepared every dish. Yet somehow I had become the assistant in my own kitchen. After everyone left, I quietly asked why he hadn't mentioned that I cooked everything. Ryan barely looked up from his phone. "I gave you credit." "You said you helped." "I found the recipe." I stared at him. "So?" He sighed dramatically. "Anita, don't turn a nice evening into an argument." I apologized again. Looking back, I wasn't keeping the peace. I was teaching him that my feelings would always be the easier thing to sacrifice. The dinner wasn't the only moment I convinced myself to ignore. Looking back, The warning signs were everywhere. I simply kept giving each one a different excuse. Love has a strange way of turning obvious patterns into isolated incidents, especially when you're determined to believe the person beside you still sees you as an equal. By the 9th month, weekends had stopped belonging to both of us. Every Saturday morning, Ryan would hand me a neatly written list before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. Dry cleaning, pharmacy, specialty grocery store across town, his favorite protein supplements, a package return, picking up his prescription. Somehow, every errand became mine, simply because I was better at organizing things. One particular Saturday still stands out in my memory. I'd finally blocked off an entire day to work on an old painting I'd started months earlier. Art had always been my escape, but life had become so consumed by responsibilities that I hadn't touched a brush in weeks. My easel was already set up by the window when Ryan walked into the room carrying another list. "Can you take care of these today?" I looked down. 9 separate stops. "Ryan." "What?" "This is going to take the whole day." "I know. I finally have time to paint." He shrugged casually. "I have tickets for the baseball game with the guys." I looked back at him. "So, because you have plans, mine disappear?" He frowned immediately. "Why are you making this into something bigger?" "I'm asking a simple question. It's just one favor." I almost laughed. One favor. Every weekend. Every week. Every month. He noticed my hesitation and sighed dramatically. "Forget it. I'll cancel." The guilt arrived exactly as it always did. "No. I'll do it." His face brightened instantly. "I knew you'd understand." By the time I returned that evening, the sunlight had disappeared. The painting remained untouched. Ryan was already home, watching television, with takeout containers scattered across the coffee table. He smiled when I walked in. "Everything done?" I nodded. "You're amazing." The compliment should have felt good. Instead, it felt like receiving employee recognition after another unpaid shift. The moment that finally began waking me up happened 2 weeks later. I came down with the worst flu I'd had in years. High fever, body aches, barely enough energy to stand. I called in sick and spent the morning drifting in and out of sleep. Around 8, Ryan stepped into the bedroom dressed for work while adjusting his tie. "What's the plan for dinner?" I looked at him, convinced I'd misunderstood. "What? Dinner? I don't think I can cook." He frowned slightly. "Can you order something before I get too hungry?" I stared at him. "Ryan, I can barely sit up." "It's only ordering food." "You don't even have to leave bed." He glanced at his watch. "I'm running late." Then he walked toward the bedroom door. "Text me if you think of anything." He left. That was it. No thermometer, no medicine, no asking how I felt, no kiss on the forehead, nothing. 8 hours later, he returned carrying takeout. 1 bag, 1 meal, for himself. When he noticed I was still asleep, he actually sounded surprised. "You're still in bed?" I didn't even have enough energy to answer. 2 months later, Ryan caught an ordinary cold. Nothing serious, a mild fever. The difference between our reactions couldn't have been clearer. I stopped by the pharmacy before work, made homemade soup, brought him medicine every 4 hours, covered him with blankets, checked his temperature, asked constantly whether he needed anything. He accepted every bit of it without hesitation, as though this was simply how life worked, as though caring only flowed in one direction. A week before everything fell apart, I came home from work and sat alone in the living room after Ryan had gone to bed. The apartment was spotless. Laundry folded, kitchen clean, groceries stocked, bills paid, appointments scheduled. Coffee ready for morning. Everything was done. Because I'd done all of it, I looked around my own condominium and suddenly couldn't remember the last time I'd done something simply because it made me happy. My paintings gathered dust. My books remained unopened. My friends had slowly stopped inviting me places because I was always busy. Busy doing what? Making Ryan's life easier. That thought refused to leave my mind. The following Thursday, I worked nearly 11 straight hours handling a major software failure at the office. By the time I finally drove home, I was physically and emotionally exhausted. All I wanted was 15 quiet minutes before thinking about dinner. Instead, I opened the front door and froze. Dirty dishes overflowed from the sink. Ryan's breakfast plate still sat on the coffee table. His shoes were scattered across the hallway. Clothes covered the dining chairs. Empty soda cans sat beside the television. Ryan was lying comfortably on the couch watching a movie. He smiled without looking away from the screen. "Oh, you're home." I slowly set my work bag down. "You've been here a while?" "About an hour." I looked around the apartment again. "Were you planning on cleaning any of this?" He finally looked at me. "What?" "The apartment." He glanced around casually. "I was going to." "When?" He muted the television. "Seriously? I'm asking." His expression immediately changed. "What's your problem tonight?" "My problem?" "Yeah. You've been weird all week." I took a slow breath. "I'm tired, Ryan." "So am I. But somehow I still come home and do everything." His eyes narrowed. "You're keeping score now?" "No. I'm finally paying attention." For the first time, he didn't have an immediate answer. Ryan stood up from the couch, folding his arms across his chest. The defensive expression on his face told me he already believed he was the victim. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't insulted him. I'd simply asked why I always seemed to carry responsibilities that belonged to both of us. "You've been acting different," he said. "I have. Ever since last week. I've started noticing things." He laughed once. "Like what?" I looked around the apartment. The dishes. The laundry. The groceries. The appointments. The bills. The cleaning. The cooking. The errands. I met his eyes. Everything. He rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go." "I'm serious." "So am I." He pointed toward the kitchen. "I contribute." "How?" "I pay for groceries." "Sometimes." "I help." "When?" His mouth opened before closing again. "You know I do." "I honestly don't." Silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke again. "I work, too." "So do I." "I'm tired." "So am I." Another silence. Then I asked the question I'd been avoiding for months. "When was the last time you cooked dinner?" He frowned. "I don't remember." "When was the last time you cleaned the bathroom?" "I don't know." "When was the last time you went grocery shopping without me asking?" His expression hardened. "Why are you interrogating me?" "I'm asking because I honestly can't remember." His frustration grew. "You're keeping score." "No, I'm describing reality." He shook his head. "You know what I think?" I waited. "I think you've started resenting me." "I don't resent you." "You resent that I actually have a life?" I stared at him. "What?" "You don't understand balance." His confidence returned, as though he'd finally found familiar ground. "You like staying home. You like organizing things. You like taking care of people." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I cook because otherwise we don't eat. I clean because otherwise the apartment becomes unlivable. I run errands because nobody else does." He shrugged. "Nobody asked you to." I almost laughed. No? You hand me lists every weekend. I ask. You expect. There's a difference. I took one slow breath. Ryan, why don't you simply do those things yourself? His answer came immediately. Because you're better at them. I looked at him quietly. No. Because you know I'll do them. His jaw tightened. What's wrong with helping your boyfriend? Nothing. Then what's the issue? The issue is that you never help yours. His face reddened. That's not true. Really? I support you emotionally. I blinked. When? All the time. The flu? His expression changed. What? When I had the flu, you asked me to order your dinner while I could barely get out of bed. He looked uncomfortable. I was busy. You came home with food. I know. For yourself. He looked away. I didn't think. No. You didn't. His irritation suddenly returned. You always make everything sound worse than it was. I don't have to. The facts already do that. He began pacing across the living room. I think this is actually about control. Control? You need to feel indispensable. I frowned. What does that even mean? You love taking care of everything. It gives you purpose. I couldn't believe the conversation had reached this point. My purpose? Yes. You need people to depend on you. I don't need that. Then why do you keep doing everything? I answered honestly. Because I thought we were building a life together. For a brief second, he looked almost guilty. Then it disappeared. I never asked you to sacrifice this much. No, you just accepted every sacrifice. He became quiet. I continued. I stopped painting. I stopped seeing friends. I stopped hiking. I stopped taking weekends for myself. I slowly stopped being Anita. He sighed dramatically. You're exaggerating. I'm finally telling the truth. The room became completely silent. Then Ryan said something that changed everything. You know what your problem is? I waited. You ask too many questions. Another pause. I liked things better before. Before what? Before you started questioning how everything worked. I looked directly into his eyes. So tell me, how does everything work? He hesitated. I could almost see him deciding whether to lie. He didn't. I keep you around. He stopped, then finished the sentence with complete certainty. Because you make my life easier. I remained silent. He continued. I don't need someone questioning every little thing. Another pause. I need someone who supports me. I asked one final question. So, I'm here to make your life easier? He nodded impatiently. Exactly. And not question you? Yes. The apartment became impossibly quiet. Ryan suddenly seemed to realize exactly what he'd admitted. But it was already too late. I looked at him for several seconds. Then I smiled. Not because I was happy, because everything finally made sense. Interesting, I said softly. He frowned. That's all? That's enough. I picked up my keys from the table. Where are you going? For a walk? We're not finished. I looked back once. Actually, we are. I walked out of the apartment without another word. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped outside. I wandered through familiar streets for nearly 2 hours. Every memory replayed itself differently now. The coffee, the dinners, the errands, the flu, the weekends. None of them had been isolated moments. They had all been evidence. Ryan hadn't accidentally taken advantage of me. He genuinely believed my role in his life was to support his, nothing more. The realization should have broken my heart. Instead, it set me free. I sat alone on a quiet park bench and took out my phone. My first call was to Marcus. He owned a moving company. Marcus?
Hey, Anita.
I need your help.
What happened?
I need to move someone's belongings.
When?
This Saturday morning. He didn't ask another question. I'll be there. My second call was to a locksmith. Saturday afternoon, new locks, no delays. Everything was arranged in less than 15 minutes. When I finally returned to the condominium, Ryan was sitting exactly where I'd left him. He stood immediately. Can we talk now? I looked at him calmly. No. We need to fix this. I already have. He didn't understand what I meant. By the end of the weekend, he would. Friday morning felt strangely peaceful. I woke before my alarm, made coffee, and for the first time in almost a year, prepared only one cup. Ryan walked into the kitchen while buttoning his shirt and immediately noticed the difference. He stared at the single mug sitting beside me before looking back at the empty side of the counter where his coffee usually waited. You forgot mine. I didn't. He frowned. So, you're still upset? I took a sip before answering. I'm not upset. Then why? I only made coffee for myself. He stood there for several seconds, clearly expecting me to laugh and tell him I was making some dramatic point. Instead, I simply continued drinking. He finally sighed. About last night. What about it? I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I looked at him. How did you mean it? He hesitated. I was angry. So? I said something stupid. Did you? His expression tightened. Anita. Come on. I've already apologized. I calmly set my mug in the sink. You haven't. I literally just did. No. You apologized for saying it. You never apologized for believing it. His face lost color for a moment. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. My Uber's here. He grabbed his suitcase. We'll finish this when I get back. I smiled politely. I don't think we will. He looked confused. What does that mean? It means have a safe trip. He shook his head, clearly frustrated that I wasn't arguing. Then he walked out the front door. I watched his car disappear from the living room window. Only after it turned the corner did I allow myself one deep breath. Then I got to work. The first few boxes came together surprisingly quickly. Ryan owned a lot of clothes, expensive shoes, electronics, and decorative items, but very little that carried genuine emotional weight. As I folded shirts and wrapped fragile belongings, I realized how little of himself he had actually invested in the life we'd built together. Marcus arrived exactly at 8 on Saturday morning with his younger brother and a moving van. He stepped inside, looked around the condominium, then looked at me. You okay? I nodded. I am now. Neither of them asked unnecessary questions. For nearly 6 hours, we packed everything carefully. Every shirt, every jacket, every gaming console, every framed photograph. Every item went into clearly labeled boxes. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was thrown away. Nothing was done out of anger. When the last box disappeared into the truck, I walked slowly through the apartment. For the first time in months, I could actually see my own home again. The walls felt brighter. The rooms felt larger. The silence no longer felt lonely. It felt peaceful. Marcus closed the truck doors. Storage units ready. I handed him the payment. Thank you. No, He smiled warmly. Congratulations. After the moving truck left, the locksmith arrived exactly as scheduled. Within an hour, every exterior lock had been replaced. I tested each new key twice. The satisfying click of the deadbolt sounded strangely symbolic. Some doors only need to be closed once. Around 4 o'clock that afternoon, I carefully placed one large envelope on top of the final stack of boxes waiting outside the condominium building. Inside was Ryan's old key, the address of the storage facility, the access code, the receipt showing I'd already paid for the first month's rental, and one handwritten note. Ryan, your belongings are safely stored. The first month has already been paid. The locks have been changed. You told me you keep me around because I make your life easier. Find someone else to keep around. Please don't contact me again. Anita. I read the note one final time. There was no anger in those words, only truth. I taped the envelope securely to the largest box. Then I carried the last empty moving carton into the recycling bin. That evening I ordered my favorite pizza, opened a bottle of sparkling water, and watched a documentary without anyone asking me to pause it halfway through to run another errand. The apartment was almost unbelievably quiet. Around 8 Sunday evening, my phone finally rang. Ryan. I watched the screen until the call ended. Seconds later, another call, then another. By midnight, 17 missed calls. The text messages started immediately afterward. My key doesn't work. Where are you? Why are my things outside? Open the door. Anita, this isn't funny. I read every message, then quietly put my phone face down on the table. Monday morning brought emails. Tuesday brought messages from unfamiliar numbers. Ryan had started borrowing his friends' phones after realizing his own number had been blocked. One message simply read, "Please talk to me." Another came from his best friend. "You really kicked him out over one argument?" I smiled sadly. One argument. No, one sentence. A sentence that finally explained every sacrifice I'd spent 10 months trying to understand. By Wednesday, building security informed me Ryan had appeared outside the condominium, asking to be let inside. I thanked them for calling, then politely asked them not to allow him onto the property again. For the first time in nearly a year, someone else was protecting my peace. The weeks that followed were surprisingly quiet. At first, the silence felt unfamiliar. I kept expecting another argument, another list of errands taped to the refrigerator, another complaint about coffee or dinner. Instead, every evening I came home to exactly what I'd spent months trying to create without realizing it. A peaceful home that actually belonged to me. Without Ryan living there, the condominium somehow stayed clean almost effortlessly. Laundry no longer piled up mysteriously. Dirty dishes didn't multiply overnight. Grocery shopping took 20 minutes instead of 2 hours because I was buying food for one person instead of constantly replacing snacks and drinks someone else consumed without ever noticing who bought them. The biggest surprise wasn't how much less work I had. It was how much more time I suddenly owned. I started painting again, not because anyone encouraged me to, because I finally could. The unfinished canvas that had sat untouched in the corner for nearly a year slowly began filling with color. Every brushstroke felt like recovering another small piece of myself that I'd quietly abandoned while trying to keep someone else's life running smoothly. My friends noticed the change before I did. "You actually came," my friend Melissa laughed one Friday night when I showed up to our monthly dinner. "I know. We stopped inviting you because you always said no." The words stung, not because she meant to hurt me, because she was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped having my own life. Everything had revolved around making Ryan's easier. A month later, my manager called me into her office. I've noticed something. I smiled nervously. What? You seem lighter. I laughed softly. I guess I am. She slid a folder across the desk. We're promoting you. For several seconds, I simply stared at the paperwork. 6 months earlier, I probably wouldn't have accepted the additional responsibility. Back then, my schedule had already revolved around someone else's needs. Now, I finally had room to grow again. Meanwhile, Ryan apparently struggled to rebuild the life he'd assumed would always be waiting for him. Mutual friends quietly filled in the details over the following weeks. He stayed with one friend until the constant complaints became exhausting. Then another. Then his older sister. Eventually, he moved back into his parents' house nearly an hour outside the city. For the first time in years, he had to manage his own life. The irony wasn't lost on me. About 3 months after the breakup, the messages began changing. The anger disappeared. The threats stopped. Instead came apologies. I understand now. I took everything you did for granted. I finally realize how much you carried. I never replied. Not because I wanted revenge, because there was nothing left to discuss. One afternoon, I received a knock on my door. The security camera showed Ryan's sister, Emily. I opened the door halfway. Hi, Emily. She looked uncomfortable. I hope I'm not bothering you. What can I help you with? She hesitated before speaking. It's Ryan. I assumed. She sighed. He's not doing well. I'm sorry to hear that. He really has changed. I'm glad. He misses you. I nodded politely. I'm sure he does. Emily looked at me carefully. That's it? What else should I say? He knows he was wrong. I believe him. Hope briefly crossed her face. You do? Yes. Then, she hesitated. Why won't you talk to him? I smiled gently. Because believing someone has changed doesn't mean I'm required to go backward. She remained silent. I continued. For almost a year, I slowly disappeared inside that relationship. I stopped recognizing myself. I don't ever want to become that woman again. Emily lowered her eyes. I don't think I understood how much you actually did. Neither did I, she nodded slowly. I'm sorry. Thank you. She quietly walked away. 6 months after everything ended, our company hosted a networking reception downtown. I almost skipped it, but Melissa convinced me to come. Halfway through the evening, while talking with coworkers, someone approached from behind. Anita. I turned. Ryan. He looked healthier than the last time I'd seen him, but the confidence was still gone. Can we talk? I looked toward the outdoor terrace. For a minute. We stepped outside into the cool evening air. He didn't waste time. I've spent months trying to understand what happened. You told me exactly what happened. I know. I've listened to myself say those words 1,000 times. He looked directly at me. I was ashamed. You should have been. I've been in therapy. I'm glad. I finally understand why I kept expecting you to carry everything. I listened quietly. My therapist asked me something. He smiled sadly. She asked what I actually contributed to our relationship. He laughed once. I couldn't answer. The silence between us felt different now. Not uncomfortable, just honest. I loved you, he whispered. I shook my head gently. No. He frowned. I loved what you did for me. His shoulders dropped. You're right. I confused comfort with love. Another long pause followed. Finally, he asked the question I knew had been coming. Is there really no chance? I looked at him with genuine kindness. The relationship ended long before that argument. What ended it? I smiled sadly. The day I stopped feeling like your girlfriend and started feeling like your employee. His eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I know. I'd do anything to fix it. You can't. Why? Because I don't miss who I became when I was with you. I took a slow breath. I love my life now. I love who I am now. And I'm never giving that woman away again. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he simply nodded. I understand. I hope you really do. I walked back inside without looking over my shoulder. Several weeks later, I met Ethan Miller through a local hiking group. Our relationship developed slowly, naturally, without expectations or scorekeeping. The first time he offered to cook dinner, he laughed when I instinctively stood up to help. I've got this. You don't have to do everything. That simple sentence almost made me cry. Not because it was extraordinary, because it was normal. Real love isn't built on one person carrying another. It's built on two people choosing, every single day, to carry life together. For 10 months, I was someone's invisible support system. The day I stopped being infrastructure, I finally became myself again.